What's up, guys? Jesse and Melissa here with Adventure Endeavor, and we're gonna dive deep into Baja and what you're gonna need to do a Baja trip. We're kind of breaking it down into three categories. The first one being
like all the things that you're gonna need, like for your rig, like actual items.
Yes, actual items that will help make it a good trip, actual hard items. And then we're going to go over paperwork that you're going to need to cross the border. And then we're going to kind of go over
what your experience might be while you're crossing the border.
Yeah, what to expect. We're going to touch on military checkpoints and just random things that might be helpful when you're going down there in Baja. Alright, so ideally, you might want to consider going to a smaller rig for a trip like Baja, just so it doesn't give you too many limitations. There's a lot of small towns and stuff like that, but we did a whole video on that, and we'll link that below, so if you guys want to check that one out, you can go ahead and that goes into full detail. But we want to start with things you might consider for your vehicle. So let's start right off the beginning. We have a diesel pickup, so there's a few things that you're gonna want to bring with you. First and foremost is going to be DEF if you have a newer truck. It's pretty hard to find down there, and I don't believe they have restrictions, and all their vehicles do not have DEF, I think. I don't know.
From what we could gather.
From what we could gather. We didn't really see it anywhere. They don't have it at the pump, everything like that. So bring some spare DEF for yourself and make sure you have plenty. Secondly, we've heard stories of the fuel not being so great down there. We didn't have that experience. But we did bring a spare fuel filter and water separator, which will be linked below as well. And we do have a video on how to change those if you have a Ram 2500 or 3500. But those are two things that are very important for your vehicle to make sure it's tip-top shape.
We actually didn't have any issues with needing to change that while we were down there, and we made it all the way down to the tip of Cabo and back. But
yeah, so no big deal. So now we have that spare fuel filter that we'll use when we do it on our next interval.
The next thing you're going to want is some sort of water jug for you to be able to easily go into town and stop at one of these water kiosks to fill up, because everyone's heard stories about how you shouldn't drink the water in Mexico. So they have these little storefronts or kiosks all over the place in a little bit of the more populated areas where you can go and get clean drinking water. And especially if you decide to go down there with a larger rig, it's a great idea to have a water jug so that you can, take your little car and drive into town.
Or bladder.
Yeah, or
Either
a bladder,
way, yeah.
And fill those up and then pump it into your bigger rig.
Moving right along into power. So for us, we didn't have our full rig, and we didn't have our full solar. We didn't bring a generator, anything like that. Basically, we brought our Lion Energy Safari LT, which is a portable power pack. I believe it's like 47 amp hours. It has a built-in inverter, a built-in charge controller, so you can charge every type. It has inputs, outputs. You can charge it. You can charge the actual pack in the truck, in a wall outlet, or you can charge it with solar panels, which that's what we opted for because we didn't have a crazy elaborate setup. But it was great. We ran our computers, we charged the GoPros, the drones, the cameras, all that with just 200-watt panels, and it was great. It worked flawlessly, and it was easy to set up a couple panels. We would just chain them up at night just in case.
Those little suitcase foldable panels, so they were really easy to move. And it has a 12-volt output on the front and then a 110 output on the side, and you power them on each separately, so you're not wasting power or wasting any of that precious juice. Something like this, some sort of portable power solution is really important in a place like Baja, because it's kind of more on the rare side to find a place that is going to have full hookups that you can rely on. We actually stayed in a couple, and the pedestals weren't working at all. So we just had to rely on our power pack, and the nature of Baja, a lot of it is very undeveloped, so even if you are going to go to a campsite where you're paying, there might not be any hookups whatsoever. So definitely don't want to rely on that all the time.
Yeah, and speaking of power, I want to touch on a generator. So you can bring a generator, that's fine, but if you bring a gas can, just make sure your can is empty. When you're going to the checkpoint, there's gonna be signs everywhere saying no fuel, no gasolina. So our buddy did do that, and he got a little you know, he got a little scoffed.
Little talking to.
Little talking to. So just bring a empty can and you can get fuel when you cross the border. Alright, so this one ended up being extremely important for us. If you follow the channel for a while, you know we like off-roading, you know we like to get off the grid, and Baja, there are a lot of primitive sites that can be in sandy areas, rocky areas, on a beach. Obviously, we have a video where we got stuck on the beach, which was super fun in the end. But that brings us to having some recovery gear. We bought Max Tracks for the trip, and we ended up using them, and they're very helpful. They can also level your rig as well, if your rig is a little uneven. And as well, it's obviously very important to have a tow strap of some sort. They do make cheapies, which are great. You can just throw it in there. A couple clevises, basically that's a way to attach the tow strap to the vehicle, because we did have friends as well that had a Class C, and they weren't really going off-road or anything. They just went down to what appeared to be a pretty nice sandy beach, and they got stuck. I mean, we were trying to go off-grid, off-road more, but it can just happen in the most random places. Like we said, there's a lot of dirt roads, different things, especially if you have a larger rig. So just be prepared with a little bit of off-road recovery gear. It'll go a long way. Everything will be linked below that we use personally and we love. So.
We mentioned Max Tracks earlier. That is just one branded type, but we actually opted for a slightly less expensive version. So there's all types out there, and you can just search for something like recovery boards or traction boards, and it'll come up with the same thing.
My bad. Max Tracks is the expensive brand, and we're not rich, so we got the knockoff ones. But we'll link them below, what we got. They did work well, so.
Yeah, it was fine. They got buried, but I think that had more to do with the rocks that we got stuck
Any type
in.
would have gotten buried. We were in a very sticky situation.
Alright, now we are moving right along into our next category, which is all of the paperwork that you're going to need for a trip to Mexico. First and foremost, obviously, you'll need a passport or some sort of passport card depending on your travels. Personally, I don't know a whole lot about the passport card because I've never had one, I've never needed one, but you can look into that. We each have a passport, so that is going to be the first and foremost thing that you will need.
Don't forget that.
Don't forget to check with your country before traveling how long your passport needs to be valid past your date of travel in order to be granted entry, because we actually had a friend that didn't make it on our trip to Baja because she thought her passport was good. She had just gone to Costa Rica a couple weeks before,
and they accepted her passport, but Mexico's rules were different. So be careful with that, because that was a huge bummer. They weren't able to join us on the trip.
Yeah, so I believe the rule is that your passport has to be valid for 6 months past the date in which you plan to travel, and hers wasn't, and she wasn't able to come. Second, you're gonna need an FMM form, which stands for, drum roll please, Forma Migratoria Multiple. So this is basically just like a document that Mexico requires for anyone entering their country, and it's really simple and easy. You just go online and fill it out. You pay, it's about $30 US to get the form, and you're going to need your a copy of the form and your receipt for it when you're crossing the border. And we actually had another friend that didn't have their receipt, and they had to pay extra, so they ended up paying $60 for the FMM.
they had it on their phone, and that just didn't work. So you get your paper and have the receipt, and had hard copies
printed out. Exactly.
Save yourself some money.
Yes, and be aware that if you just Google search FMM form, not every single website that pops up is going to be is going to offer you, I guess, the best price. Make sure you're going to like the official government website, and it will, if you do the math, it'll be about $30 US per form. The first one that I started filling out wanted to charge me $100 per form, and I said, what? That's crazy. So I did a little bit more research. So just be mindful of that. There are different websites out there that will try to charge you more for the exact same service.
Alright, I'm going to cover this subject. Even though she handled all the paperwork, I don't really know anything about it. I'm feeling a little left out. So.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Alright, so you have to get Mexican car insurance, and you get that before you go. It's what was it? We paid like $300, but it's good for 6 months, roughly.
Exactly. There are different like spans of time that you can get it, and because we were going for at least 3 weeks, it made more sense to buy a 6-month plan than just pay daily for 3 weeks.
Which is
more
good,
cost effective.
because we extended our trip as well.
You can get it valid for a year if you wanted to prepay for something like that. It depends on how often you're going down into Mexico.
And then there's another form called a tip, which basically is if you want to go all the way down the peninsula to the tip and then jump back over to mainland Mexico, you need that form, which you can get online or at the border, but you cannot get it in La Paz. Is that correct?
Right. So if you're going into Mexico and you think you might want to take the ferry down, across the Sea of Cortez into the mainland, you'll want to get the TIP stands for Temporary Import Permit, and where you can take the ferry across and
then you can cross into mainland Mexico.
But you need...
It's that easy. Just get your tip.
Okay.
Another thing that you're gonna want, and it's not required, but this is something we read a lot about, was we took a photocopy of our passport and our driver's license, and we carried that with us in our truck for the both of us, whoever's going to be doing any form of driving. And we had our insurance in our car with us, and we had a copy of our FMM. But when you go through the military checkpoints, or when you get pulled over by policia, anything like that, give them the photocopies, because there have been stories, apparently, we didn't experience this, of them taking your passport or your driver's license and basically wanting, to get paid to get it back. So we went through multiple checkpoints. When they asked, we gave them a photocopy that had our passport and our license, and they were totally fine with that. They never asked for a hard copy, which we had as well. And then you take all your original copies, and you're going to want to just kind of hide them. We put them in the camper somewhere, just so they're out of sight, out of mind. We put our passports in the camper as well, hidden, and it gives you peace of mind when you're going through all these checkpoints and people are looking through your whole rig, and you know that they have a copy, and it's just less stress.
So if you are traveling with pets, cats or dogs or parrot, whatever, you actually do not need your pet vaccination records to cross the border anymore. That used to be a requirement, but it doesn't exist. It's never a bad idea to travel with those vaccination records regardless, especially if you happen to be a full-timer.
Yeah, you probably already have them anyways, so you might as well just bring them, but they never asked. I mean, they didn't even ask at our dogs at all. They didn't look at them like anything.
They didn't look at our dog food?
Yeah, they didn't look at our dog food. Just make sure your dogs don't bark at them, because our dogs are being really calm and they're in the back seat. And then all of a sudden, one of our dogs barked at the lady that was inspecting our truck, and then she was in a very bad mood.
Yeah.
Which I don't blame her. She got kind of scared.
Yeah.
So.
And at the military checkpoints, they especially asked if the dogs bite, which they say like, muerden? And you could say, no muerden.
Yeah. This is kind of our third category, and this is just like what to expect, like our experiences that we had crossing the borders and everything like that. So we entered through Mexicali East. We read that it was a really good way to enter, plus just the way we had everybody coming from all over the place, that made sense to enter. And then when we went through inspection, we basically jammed down to San Felipe afterwards. What was your experience like inside when you went in? She went in and I stayed in the truck with the dogs.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I don't know if it's only at that border crossing, but that was our experience, and we know multiple other people that have had the same experience. So at Mexicali East, you pull up and they ask one of you to get out and go inside, and that person handles all the paperwork, getting your passports checked and stamped and FMM stamped and all of that stuff. And the person in the truck pulls forward to the vehicle inspection area and just parks it and waits there. So, I just walked in, there was no line, there was nobody there. We went pretty early in the morning. So that's another good tip, is the earlier you go, the better, the faster experience you're gonna have. They just checked our FMM forms, our FMM receipt, and our passport validity, and gave us a stamp and sent us on our way.
Yeah, and then I was just waiting out in the truck with the dogs, and they did have a canine there, sniffing cars, and I waited, they came up to my window, they asked me to get out, and then they said inspección, and they looked in the back seat, and that's when our rude dogs barked at them, and then put the lady in a very bad mood, and then we went around to the back of the camper, and I opened it up, and I showed her how to open the cabinets, because they're really weird in that camper, and they just kind of looked around real briefly, and then that was it, and they said, you're good to go, and we had a meetup spot outside of the border because we were with us and 2 other vehicles. And so we're like, okay, when everybody's done, just meet up here around the corner. And then we jammed all the way to San Felipe.
They might possibly send you through like a secondary x-ray. They did that to us coming back north into the US, but going south we didn't have to go through the x-ray machine. But that is just another thing that you might be subject to do if you have to do a secondary inspection for any reason.
Yeah, and the US was very similar in a sense. We got there at 9:30, which was weird because online it says it opens at 10, but we wanted to get there early, and we literally were done by 10. 9:30 to 10 we were done. So you go through, they have like the little photo thing that takes a photo of the vehicle and the people inside. They check your passports at the gate. And then he said, all right, do you know that you have to do secondary inspection? And we went ahead and we did the secondary inspection, which is you drive through the x-ray machine and then you actually get out with your dogs and they pull you aside and then they just look through your camper and they look under it with a mirror and that's about that.
Yeah, so things that they're mostly checking for going into Mexico are fuel, and if you they think you might be like bringing things into the country to sell, they might tax you on that.
Oh yeah.
We have a friend that has like a little inflatable boat with a detachable motor, and their motor was detached in their cargo box, and they thought that they were going to be selling that motor down in Mexico somewhere, so they charged them $100 to import it, an import tax.
So there's kind of a few little weird things like that, but overall, I mean, maybe we got lucky, but the borders in both directions were very easy. Everybody was extremely nice. As long as you have all your paperwork, there's really nothing to worry about, because I was nervous, to be honest, because, like, I mean, we have driven to Canada, but Canadians are so nice. Like, you know, I didn't know what to expect going down.
It's always a slightly nerve-wracking experience. You know, these are government officials, and you don't want to mess up and say the wrong thing and then have to sit there for an hour while they dig through every single compartment in your rig. And
yeah, and obviously we
nerve-wracking.
we had nothing to hide, so there's really nothing to worry about. But I guess you just, you know, I got nervous because it's something I'm not used to, realistically.
Yeah, I mean, they might ask, like, what stuff do you have in there? Like, you know, and you could say just clothes, general
just be honest
stuff. There are certain restrictions on types of food that you can bring in, food and snacks. You know, you're not supposed to bring any fresh fruits or vegetables, certain types of meat.
You know,
so
no beef, but you could bring chicken and turkey.
You can bring, like, dried pork. I don't know. Double check the government website to see what you can and can't bring. We were able to bring, like, packaged, like, factory packaged cheeses.
Yeah, and we did like a small
snacks.
run to Costco beforehand, and so we had some snacks for the drive. Because like we said, we went and headed straight to San Felipe because apparently Mexicali, like the bigger cities, are not the safest. So that's why we went early in the morning, and we had planned on doing the border and then driving a 2-hour shot down to San Felipe. So that's kind of what to expect with the borders. And then we wanted to touch on the military checkpoints. Almost every drive you have down there is like, you know, a 2 to 3 hour drive, and there will be a military checkpoint in between. Lots of times they just wave you through without issue, no big deal. You know, we were in a group almost every time, so the person in the front would say, you know, we're traveling in this group, and they would let them know. Sometimes they would inspect the people in the middle at the end, sometimes everybody to go through, sometimes they would inspect everybody. But same thing, very nice. It's a little weird in the beginning just because, you know, they're younger guys doing their time in the military, and, you know, they have M16s there and they're in full gear, and we're not used to that in the US.
Yeah, you're just not used to seeing that.
It was simple, easy, they were nice. I felt like a lot of the time they just wanted to see like what the inside of the camper looked like.
Yeah, because they're all different, and they don't, you know, if they don't ever have experience seeing those kinds of things, they're like curious. What's in
And
here?
we for sure got more inspections going north. So
Yes.
on our turnaround trip, we got more inspection. Almost every time they asked to look inside. They open some cabinets and they ask you if you have drugs or pistolas or stuff like that. But overall, it was good and nothing to be worried about. All right, guys. Well, we hope you found this video informative. We feel like there's a lot of good info in here that we had to search for. Like we said before, all the products that we purchased or used will be linked below. And hopefully this makes planning for your trip a lot easier. Like I said, she handled the paperwork side. I did more of like the vehicle stuff and stuff we knew that we would need. If you have any questions, let us know in the description in the comments. Let us know in the comments and we'll answer them. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think you did a great job at
Butchering that last statement?
yeah, like I'm doing right now.
Like always, guys, thanks for joining us on our adventure endeavor.